Good morning. It's Kristen with the Williams team from Austin, Texas. Actually reporting from Phoenix, Arizona. We've had a place and a Built How real estate conference that I've been attending. I'll be flying home later today, and happy to bring you some kind of a little bit of new information. We are partnered with Goldman Sachs. And so they were able to speak to us on multiple occasions about just what's going on in the economy, economically and globally. And so I thought I would share some of those stats and figures and a little bit of how it relates to the housing market. But overall, this guy who spoke, Michael, he was just brilliant and smart. And I was just scribbling down notes as fast as I possibly could. But overall, he kind of gave an explanation of, we are where we are today with inflation and interest rates so high because during the very beginning of the pandemic, everything shut down. It was like turning a car engine off on a car, and that's what happened to the U.S. economy and economies across the globally. And so once that happened, we went down so fast. So then the government stimulated the economy with all of the stimulus money. And then the economy went straight back up. So we had like a V down and a V up. So we had a V-shaped recovery. So it was super down quick and then up quick. But so what that did is obviously it repaired the economy quite quickly. Yet at the same time, then the demand for prices and the demand for goods went up. We have a very highly employed country. So, unemployment, as you've all heard, is at the all-time low. The job labor market is super, super tight. And then the cost of goods are up. So, they're trying to do their best to control the inflation and the cost of everything. And what they're doing is obviously raising the federal funds rate, the interest rate, which as it translates into the housing market is the mortgage rate and the cost to borrow money from large banks, right? So that's, where we're at. We saw rates this week climb to 7%. And then we saw them kind of dip back down into the mid 6 percentile range. They're predicting that they might go even higher into the higher sevens, potentially 8% by the time they start to regulate that rate, because they're really pushing their foot on the gas as hard as they can to really control inflation and lower the prices. We've got our wages high. And so it was kind of interesting to hear him talk. He's like, the good news is that people are employed and wages are as high as possible. And that seems like it should be good news, but for the economy, it's not, because it creates the cost of goods and services to go way, way up. And so they need that to be lowered. And so by raising the cost of borrowing money, that's the one metric that they're using that really, really hard. So it was just kind of an interesting conversation with him. He also talked about the fact that only 2% of people who own their home have negative equity. So that means 98% of people who own a home have positive equity in a home. Plus, 90% of those people have a mortgage rate that is below 4%. So we as a whole have what we've called kind of a golden handcuff. So we might have a seller or a buyer who wants to buy a home, or a seller wants to sell a home, but it's almost cheaper to just stay in the home that you have because you have such a low interest rate. To go buy another house at a higher interest rate is going to cost you more money. And so we're kind of dealing with that. We still have an inventory shortage in the Austin area. I do feel like we seem to have enough supply because the supply that we have isn't moving nearly as quickly. We saw almost 1,700 price reductions last weekend. We saw closer to 1,600. So that number did go down by about 100 listings this week. So hopefully we continue to see price reductions trail down, which means we're starting to see a little bit of stabilization on where our prices are landing in order to get the home sold. He thinks that overall the economy is probably going to see in a single digit decline in the housing market and the value of homes. In Austin, we're probably starting to see maybe like a 1 to 2% dip in values. But again, that's a very relative number, because the value before the kind of that peak value was sort of an inflated value to begin with. So if we were to kind of look back, it may not necessarily be a decline. It's a decline from what it was at the peak, but that peak was also a little bit a very inflated number. So anyhow, lots of notes. Happy to share any anything that you have questions on. Certainly love to have this conversation with anybody who would love to have it and wants to pick my brain on the things that I learned at this conference and convention, and talking specifically about the economy with Goldman Sachs. So I'm just here to be that economic expert, or I'm not really always an economic expert, but do my very best to learn and then share that information, share that knowledge with you all. So have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you next Friday. I'll be back in Austin, Texas, reporting potentially from my bathroom. So have a wonderful weekend. I will see you next week.